Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Connor Spencer, and today we are discussing why register your business as a company, 5 key benefits. Now, registering a company is a very hot topic here at LawPath, and we approach this in a number of different ways. We do have people actually just registering their company from the start through us, for which we do provide a free registration call to go through that ASIC form with one of our reps. But before we even get to that, if you do have questions about the structure or you want to weigh up and compare an ACN to other things like partnership or trust or some sort of hybrid structure, you obviously do need to understand your responsibilities as a company owner. What are some of the benefits, both tax or from a legal standpoint? So we do stress that you do speak to one of our lawyers to get those answers. Because if it's not set up the right way for you, it's frustrating for you and it's frustrating for us because we want you to have built the best legal floor for your business. So obviously from day one, or day zero, you're off to a great start. And what I mean by that is obviously you're fully aware of your responsibilities and compliance. You have that optimal structure in place. And importantly, you're not going to have to change anything, at least in the very short term, to your company. Because if you do have to, if there has been a mistake or a change there, you now have the added headache of having to make those changes on ASIC, which can actually cost you more as well. And that's the last thing you want when starting a business. So please speak to a professional. Arm yourself with the knowledge our lawyers can provide. Speaking of lawyers, today's webinar will be joined by Damon Murdoch. He is LawPath's principal lawyer, and he has been practicing for decades. He has extensive experience within this field, as well as other legal areas in commercial and business law. And if anyone wants to view our Meet the Lawyers page on our website, you can see Damon. You can see also our other lawyers internally who deal with our legal advice plan clients. You will see, for example, Damon has a 5 out of 5 star rating out of 300 reviews. So what we'll be covering, Damon will cover differences in sole trader, partnership, company, and trusts. He'll also cover different business structures, features of each structure, types of companies, and other additional considerations before starting a company. Finally, I'll speak to how LawPath can help, and then we'll conclude with a Q&A session. So if there is any point during this webinar, you're reading the slide or you're hearing something and you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A chat box. There is a general chat bot as well, but the Q&A one will be taken with Damon at the end. Most people in this webinar, don't have a legal background. You're not expected to know the basics, let alone the nuances of commercial law. So please, if you have a question, submit it. We'd love to answer at the end. And for those of you who maybe want to speak to a lawyer or to an accountant that we have here, or just generally want to learn more about LawPath and how we would work essentially as an employee for your business, please type yes in the general chat box or send me an email. Providing my details in that chat there as well. But those of you who are new to LawPath, we're an Australian-based online digital legal platform. We are fortunate enough to be Australia's leading online legal platform for small and medium businesses. And while we reside in Sydney, we are working with many successful businesses across the whole country. To date, we've helped over 500,000 startups in multiple different ways over the last 10 years. But fundamentally, we are here to save you money. Our singular mission statement is that we do not believe startups and small businesses should be paying extortionate fees for their legal and accounting services. So please stick around actually to the end of the webinar, as we will be offering a 7-day free trial. And if you would like to claim that as it starts today, another reason to type yes in the general chat box. However, if would like to check us out maybe in your own time, I've included links there to our reviews, our success stories, our pages to see our internal lawyers and testimonials submitted by clients, as well as our LinkedIn page if you'd like to see us there. So we're ridiculously confident you'll like what you've seen here. Because if you haven't started a business or are about to and have not spoken to a commercial lawyer, I think you'll be really encouraged to use us going forward. But right, that's enough from me. I'll hand things over to Damien.
Great, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So today's presentation, we're going to start off with the bare bone basics, explaining what a sole trader is, what a company is, We're then going to slowly work our way into company structures, family trusts, the benefits of those, and then the different legal documents that you generally would require. If you have any questions, drop it in the Q&A. I always find the most valuable time during these presentations is the actual Q&A section. So if you don't know, I'm sure a lot of people don't know the same thing. So feel free to ask whatever you want. And it doesn't matter whether it touches or concerns this presentation. Feel free to ask me anything. I'm happy to answer. All right, so the general structures that we have is a sole trader, partnership, and a company. We also have family trusts, which I'll talk to later, and then we can have a combination of all of these as well. And it depends on how complex you want your structure and what you're actually doing, whether you're looking for asset protection, whether you're looking for income distribution, giving you more flexibility, which normally a trust does, and things like that. But at the beginning, we'll look at the very beginning structure, which is a sole trader. It's a very simple way to start off a business. So if you have an idea, you don't want to spend a lot of money in getting that idea off the ground, you want to test the market possibly, or if maybe you don't think you're going to make a lot of income from your business and it's kind of like a side gig for you, then sole trader might be the right solution. A sole trader is effectively all you have to do is go and get an ABN, an Australian business number. You go to the government website, you can Google apply for ABN, and effectively, once you have an ABN, you have a business number, and away you go, you're now a sole trader. You can get a business name to attach to your sole trader business. So you could be, for instance, a guy named Jim, and you want to do mowing, so you can get a business name called Jim's Mowing. And even though that's obviously taken and it's just an example, but you can use Jim's Mowing, and then your business, rather than it being your actual name, you can trade under a different name as part of your business. But at the end of the day, when you file tax returns, it's just you filing your own personal tax returns because you are trading in your own capacity. So what that means is that it's very easy structure. You don't have to worry about a lot of the things that you would have to worry about when you have a company, like complying with the Corporations Act and how to make decisions and getting shareholder approvals and things like that. It's really fairly simple. But the one thing that you want to look at that's not that simple is your liability. If you are trading a business in your own personal name, it means that you are personally liable. And we'll talk about why it can be beneficial to have a company if you are doing something that might have some kind of risk, whether it's a risk to people's health and safety, whether it's a risk that the product you're selling might be defective and people might want refunds, or it might burn down a house. If you're selling, for instance, batteries that you import from overseas, or scooters or things like that. And then the other side of things is if you want to take an investment, if you want to give shares to your employees, if you want to grow your business by bringing in other partners, then a sole trader business isn't really the right option for you. But at the very beginning stages, a sole trader is a nice, simple way to get going. You can always transfer from a sole trader to a company at a later date, but there is a bit of a process there. You normally have to pay a fair amount of fees and accounting costs normally, because you normally value your business and you're selling your business from you personally to a company that you own. So there's a transfer of shares. The other problem with transferring from a sole trader to a business or to a company later is that all the contracts that you might have entered into with your customers are contracts in the name of your sole trader business, not in the name of your new company, which means all the contracts now need to be assigned over. So one thing to look out for is if you are operating as a sole trader and you are getting people to sign off on contracts, you want to look and see if you have what's called an assignment clause. And you want to be able to assign the clause or assign the agreement by simply giving notice to the other person. That gives you the opportunity that if you ever want to switch to a company, you can just give them notice that the contract's being assigned to the new business. Another issue is that you can't use the same bank account. So when you sell your sole trader business to a new company, your bank account changes, which means that if you're doing an online platform where it takes a lot of work to collect everybody's bank accounts, or if you're having direct debiting, or if you're a personal trainer with direct debit features, things like that, then it's going to be almost a nightmare to transfer everybody across into that new bank account by getting their bank account, or giving them your new bank account details. So those are some of the disadvantages of starting as a sole trader and then transferring into a company later. A partnership is something that is fairly old school from our perspective. It used to be that lawyers and accountants always used partnerships because we weren't by law allowed to use companies. They've changed the law now where law firms are allowed to have companies, and same thing as accountants. So a lot of times now partnerships are very rare. A lot of time when people say, I want to enter into a partnership with somebody, it actually means that they're normally going to incorporate a company, and then each of them are going to hold shares in the company, and effectively you form a partnership from a partnership relationship, but it's actually not the legal entity known as a partnership. But partnership is very similar to a sole trader. The partnership itself is two or more people that come together to operate a business. The business has its own ABN, but all the distributions and everything goes back to the individuals that own it, being the sole traders effectively, and they just file their normal tax return. So it doesn't necessarily give, I guess, the tax treatments or the beneficial treatment that a company might give. It also doesn't necessarily give you certain government grants. So a lot of times if you want a government grant, then you normally need to have a company. If you're doing research and development, so if you're a software company, you normally can't apply for the R&D tax incentive. And if you don't know the R&D tax incentive, it's the longest running incentive program by the Australian Tax Office. It basically says that if you're spending money on research or development of something that's new and innovative that you intend to commercialize and you own it, then you can apply to the government to get 43.5 cents back on every dollar that you spent on research and development. There's a lot of different rules around it, and accountants normally are the ones that do it, not lawyers, but it's worthwhile for you to know that the existence of this R&D tax incentive, so that if you are effectively sitting in your basement drafting code and planning on launching this new software and then incorporating a company in the future, you'll be much better off incorporating your company now than doing it in the future, so that you can claim those R&D tax incentives. Also, if you are planning on running a business, you don't necessarily need to be registered for GST at the very beginning, and you only need to be registered for GST once you make income of over 75,000. The issue is that if you believe that you actually are going to generate revenue of more than 75,000, it might be worthwhile now to get your registration for GST, so that you can offset the GST that you're paying out against the GST that you're receiving at a future date. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's more, again, of an accounting perspective, and you'd want to get accounting advice whether you register for GST or not. But again, same as sole traders, partners are personally liable for the liabilities of the actual partnership itself. So it doesn't give you an asset protection element that a company does. Now, if we look at a company is generally, it's the most common structure for businesses in Australia. It gives you a lot of features, a lot of benefits, tax benefits, and so on. So what we'll do is we'll look at a company generally at the very beginning, and then we'll look into the pros and cons. So a lot of people might be a little bit intimidated by incorporating a company because they just don't know anything about it. Now, the first thing is that it's been around for a very, very long time, and a company is a separate legal entity. That means that the business that a company does is the company's own business, and the people who stand behind it, like the directors and shareholders, aren't normally responsible for the acts of the company. So if the company incurs debts, or if the company sells a product that ends up being defective and they have to do a rollout of recalling all those products and refunding them. If the company doesn't have money to do that, it can go into liquidation, close down, and normally it won't affect the directors or the shareholders at all. Now, there are limitations to that, and I'll talk about that, such as insider or insolvent trading in a later slide. But it is a separate legal entity, which means that you, as a person that's running that business, are generally going to be protected from the business that you're operating. So it gives you that asset protection automatically. So if you have a home in your personal name and you're a sole trader, your home could be at risk if your company or your business was sued if you're a sole trader. Whereas if you have a company and you are the shareholder and director of that company and you personally have a home and the company sued, normally your home will be protected because it's not an asset of the actual company itself. Now, if we look at the pros and cons, the first one is that most companies are a proprietary limited, a PTY Ltd company. What that means is proprietary privately owned, and limited means the shareholder's total liability that it owes to anybody is limited to the amount that they have paid up on their shares. So by way of an analogy or an example, if you incorporate a company with 1 million shares at $1 per share, and you haven't put $1 million into the company's bank account, that shareholder is liable to the company for $1 million. And if the company was put into liquidation, a liquidator can now go after that shareholder for the $1 million that it never paid on those shares. Alternatively, if you created a company with 10,000 shares at 0.001 cent per share, then for a total of $100, then the shareholder's total liability is $100. And as long as it's paid that $100 into the company's bank account, no one can come after a shareholder for anything because the shareholder's liability is limited to that $100. The second thing is, for a director, your liability is limited except for insolvent trading and tax generally, or misleading and deceptive conduct in some employment-related matters. So insolvent trading is when a company incurs debts and cannot pay those debts when they come due. And effectively what that means is, let's say, for instance, you borrow money from somebody, you know that the company cannot pay that money back, you have no means to be able to pay that money back, and then that debt comes due. Well, you actually entered insolvency. You were actually insolvent at the time you borrowed the money because you borrowed it with no means of repaying it, which means that by signing off the loan document, you actually incurred a debt knowing that you can't pay it back. So you're insolvent, but you're not actually insolvent trading until the debt actually comes due. And so when the debt comes due, like the due date comes up and you can't pay, that's the trigger event for insolvent trading. And a director that keeps on trading and keeps on going along and entering into business and doing business when it has debts that they cannot pay, that director can be personally liable for the debts that they've incurred while they were insolvent trading. So if you're running a company that owes $100,000 and you have no means to pay back that $100,000, whether it's to suppliers or whatever it might be, and you keep on trading the business and you keep on increasing those debts, and then the company collapses because someone gets judgment against the company, appoints a liquidator, the liquidator will look into the accounts of the company and they'll issue subpoenas on the banks to get the accounts of the company. And they'll see that the company wasn't able to pay its debts for a certain period of time, and then they can sue the director personally for insolvent trading to recover those debts. The next thing is tax. A director is liable to and must make sure that a company pays superannuation to the employees, withholds the tax when you pay your employees, pays GST, pays the corporate tax. If the company doesn't pay its tax, then the ATO can issue what's called the director penalty notice, basically transferring the debt from the company over to the director and then sue the director personally for that liability. And then the other one is misleading deceptive conduct. If you're on the phone, you're talking to someone, you're telling them that this product is amazing, or you tell them that your service is amazing, and you end up providing service that's not so amazing, people could sue you as personally for misleading and deceptive conduct. You misled them and you deceive them and you induce them to enter into business with you or to buy a product from you. And it's only because of your representation that they made a decision to go ahead and do that business with you. And it's because of your misleading conduct that has resulted in them suffering a loss. And therefore, they can potentially sue the director personally for misleading, deceptive conduct. And then the other one is employment law. So not paying annual leave entitlements, not paying long service leave entitlements, public holiday pay, things like that. A director can be personally liable. Or there's something called general protection. If someone has a legal right, they exercise that right, and adverse action has been taken because of them exercising that right. So, for example, someone has a right to take medical leave. As a result of them taking medical leave, the employer then terminates them from their employment, which is the adverse action. Then in those circumstances, the employee can sue the employer for a general protection, which is basically adverse action was taken because of them taking medical leave, and can join in the directors for aiding and abetting that termination. And same thing for unlawful termination, where you discriminate against someone, things like that. Those are other areas where directors can be personally liable. Now, it sounds like a lot, but it's actually very strict and a very narrow approach when you're looking at where directors can be personally liable. Companies enter into the contracts in their own capacity, and companies can raise capital. Now, we have a YouTube channel, we have a lot of webinars, we have a lot of videos. If you ever are interested in educating yourself up on different topics that we might touch upon today, probably there's already a YouTube video on our YouTube page talking about it. So if we talk about capital raising, you don't know how to do it, we have a webinar for an hour talking about all the different ways to capital raise. But most companies raise capital by either getting loans, by selling shares, or giving options to convert into shares. And basically what happens is that you incorporate a company, and you might issue yourself 100 shares. And when you issue yourself those 100 shares, you're now the sole shareholder of the business. Now, as the shareholder of the business, anyone holding more than 50% shares of the business has a right to appoint a director. So then you appoint yourself as a director. And that's why if you have a company now, you're a director. The only reason you're a director is because you as a shareholder appointed yourself as the director. And the director is the one that signs off on all the contracts, files its tax returns, has access to the bank accounts, and does all the day-to-day management of the company. Now, if you wanted to raise capital, you would issue, for instance, another 100 shares, and you would sell those shares, and someone would buy the shares from the company and deposit the money in the company's bank account. Now you have 200 shares, which means that you're now a 50% shareholder. The other person that just bought 100 shares is now 50% shareholder because you have 100 shares, they have 100 shares. In total, you have 200 shares, and each of you have 100 each, making you 50-50 shareholder. Now, because you're 50-50, you no longer have a right to appoint a director or remove a director because you don't have more than 50% shares. And this is why you normally want to have a shareholders agreement that discusses these kind of issues, which we'll talk about shortly. Now, the negative side of the company is that there's more administrative costs. So you have ongoing annual fee to pay to ASIC to keep your company alive. You have to pay $576 to incorporate your company. You have to file your tax returns every year, which needs financial reports. So you need a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. And normally you need to get your accountant to do that. Because you're trading as a business, you normally will have Xero or MyOp or one of the similar softwares. So you have those subscription fees, and those are ongoing costs that you have to pay year on year to maintain your business. You also have to comply with the Corporations Act, which means you are bound by director duties. Director duties are acting for the best interests of the shareholders, not using the information of the company to benefit yourself, not using the information or documents of the company to benefit somebody else, not to act in conflict of your own personal interests against the interests of the shareholders, not to treat minor shareholders differently to everybody else. So things like that, those are generally the main areas of law that we normally deal with when you're looking at the Corporations Act. Now, when we look at what's the best kind of structure to establish, it really depends on what you're doing as a business. It's not uncommon where you'll have a holding company that owns all your assets. So for instance, if you're a software company, again, you have all the software developed by the holding company, and then you get the holding company, and you're the shareholder of the holding company and director of the holding company, and then you get the holding company to then incorporate a trading company, and the holding company is 100% shareholder of the trading company. And then the holding company licenses its intellectual property down to the trading company to commercialize and enter into contracts with customers. So that if anything ever happened to the trading company, you can close down the trading company, but because the trading company doesn't own the asset, because the holding company owns it, and because there's a license agreement where the holding company has only licensed the technology to the trading company, you still get to keep your asset because it's the trading company that hasn't been successful, but the holding company is one step removed from the customers, so it protects your assets. Other different kinds of companies that create this kind of structure is normally manufacturing. All your equipment is bought in your holding company, or your factory is bought in your holding company, and then it's licensed down or leased down to the trading company to use. A lot of times people also will have a company, but rather than you personally being the shareholder of the company, it might be that your family trust is the shareholder. And the reason why you do that is that when your company makes a profit, it will pay dividends to its shareholders. And when the shareholder gets those dividends, for instance, a family trust, then the family trust can distribute those dividends between you, your spouse, possibly your children, your parents, maybe another company that you own, and it gets distributed out to each of those individuals. Rather than if you own the shares personally, then it only goes to you. And when you get the dividend and it goes to you, you have to pay your normal income tax on that. But it's what's called a frank dividend, because your trading company will have paid. So I'll give an example. Your company makes $100,000 profit. Your company then pays 25% tax on that. There's $75,000 left. If you were the sole shareholder of that business, then that $75,000 then gets paid to you, but 25% tax has already been paid on it. So if you are in the 40% tax bracket, you have to pay another 15% on that $75,000 because the company's already paid 25% tax on it. You're on 40% tax bracket, so there's a 15% gap. So it then goes, you have to pay income tax on it. But if you had a family trust and your spouse, for instance, wasn't working, you can maybe distribute some of that $75,000 to your spouse and possibly some to your children and some to you, which means that you would have lower income brackets, which means you might be able to save in tax. A family trust is not made to avoid tax by any means. It really is a way to structure it so that you can make other beneficiaries receive the benefit of your dividends. It also gives you asset protection. So for instance, if you were to get in a car accident and were sued, if you own the shares personally in your own name, then the person that sues you, they could try to recover the shares that you own because that's an asset that's owned in your own name. But if it was held by a family trust, then that family trust is a separate entity. It's not in your own personal name, and normally they won't be able to go against the shares that are held in your company because they're owned by a separate entity. So those are a couple of reasons why we have different structures with different levels of companies and family trusts as well. Now, the process generally, so when we look at registration of companies, it's a fairly simple process. There's different ones that you can incorporate if you're going to have a, let's say, for instance, you're going to have a local club, then you might do an incorporated association. Those are state-based laws. Corporations Act doesn't apply. If you were to create a charity, that's a company limited by guarantee normally. But there are different structures, but essentially these are the main ones that have been outlined so far. You also want to look at choosing your name. And when you choose your name, a lot of people will come up with an idea, they'll come up with a name, they'll go and they'll look to see whether their name's available for them to create it, like My Business Pty Ltd. And then they see it is, they get excited, they register the company with that name. Now, the problem is that they probably didn't look to see whether someone has a trading name or business name with the same name, and they didn't check IP Australia to see if someone has a trademark. So just because you were successful in getting the domain name or successful in getting your company incorporated doesn't mean that you're not going to possibly fall foul to someone else's trademark. So it's really important that you Google around, make sure no one else is using the name that you propose to use, and also do an IP Australia trademark search. And if you just Google those words into Google, you'll be able to find a search function with IP Australia to search up your name. Now, a lot of people think that if they just create a company like lawpath.com.au, then it means that no one else can register or trade as lawpath.com or lawpath Pty Ltd. That's not true. All that does, it means that no one else can register a company called Lawpath Pty Ltd. But someone can register Lawpath Solutions, Lawpath Enterprise, Lawpath Operations, Lawpath Legal, and that doesn't stop anybody from just making something slightly different. What stops people from using the word Lawpath is a trademark. And that trademark is what you want to be looking to see if someone else has the identical business. So do that before you actually incorporate your company. Otherwise, you might get a letter of demand from someone saying, change your name, change your brand, give us the domain name because you're copying us, and we've existed before you did. Other things that if you were to create a company, you got to get a director's ID, which is through your MyGov app. It's basically a unique identifier which links your tax file number effectively to your company. So it's to minimize fraud and scams, and it's to connect someone to the company so that if your company was to be involved in fraud and scams, they can find the director and go after that director. If you want to know more about director IDs, you can go to Lawpath website, you can do search, and Lawpath has an article on how to get your director ID. And also remember, if you do have a company, you got to do a renewal every single year, and you got to pay that fee every year. And if you don't pay the fee, there's significant fines that apply month on month, and as well as that the asset can strike off your company. Now, we've already kind of went through this, but generally speaking, from a tax perspective, sole trader, you charge at your normal tax rate, companies at 25%, and then any dividends are normally franked, so the company pays tax on it, and then it goes to the shareholders, and then they pay their normal tax, their tax rates. A couple things about a company is you can not distribute the dividends, and you can not distribute the profit to yourself, and you can reinvest that money back into your company and grow it. So that's one benefit to a company from a tax perspective, so that you don't have to pay any income tax on it because it's never touching your hands, it's staying in your company. Also, if you have losses, for instance, in the first year, you can offset those losses against the profits the next year, which also will minimize your corporate tax. Partnerships, same thing as sole traders effectively, and trusts, again, you have the ability to distribute to your beneficiaries, some who might not be working, some might not have income, might be in the lower income tax bracket, so you might be able to save income tax that way. Again, we've already talked about the personal liability side of things. Sole traders, personal liability, company, separate legal entity, partnership, same as sole trader. Trusts, normally trusts actually don't trade at all. A lot of time a trust doesn't even get ABN because it's just holding assets. And so a lot of the times there is no liability for a trust because it's not doing anything other than holding assets. But a trustee can be personally liable to the beneficiaries if they're doing something which is what's called a breach of a fiduciary duty, where they're committing fraud, they're acting in bad faith towards the beneficiaries. And again, if you want to learn more about trust, you can see our YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about any of this, have a look at our YouTube channel. Now, which trust or which structure should you choose? It really does depend on your long-term goals. It depends on what kind of business you're doing. If it's a high-risk business, you're going to want a company. If it's a very high-risk business, you might want a dual company structure with the assets in the company held by the holding company and just licensed down to the trading company. If it's business services that you might want to bring in partners, again, you're probably going to want a company so that you can bring in partners. You can issue employee share options to entice the employees to stay with you, and you can bring in investment. Again, a sole trader is normally for a smaller business that doesn't have the opportunity to bring in partners, doesn't have the opportunity to get investments. And then when you look at trust structures, it really does depend whether you think you might have an exit event in the future by selling it, whether you're going to be making a lot of profits that you're going to want to be distributing, things like that. Now, if you want to get more information, you can go to the LawPath website, and they do have a quick quiz for you to have a look at, and that quiz can explain which structure might be best for you. Obviously, if you really want to know, you're probably best off talking to an accountant or a lawyer to get proper structuring advice, because there are different structures that I haven't touched upon, like unit trusts as well, and that sometimes is for people going into business together to buy property. So before you actually start a company, some things that you need to know: for a director, you need to have at least one director ordinarily residing in Australia. You are allowed to have foreign directors, but you have to have at least one in Australia who has to be over the age of 18. Same for a company, you got to have at least one shareholder, but you can have many shareholders. And if you're going to have more than one, you're going to want to have a shareholders agreement. You're going to want to look at getting your business name registered if you're going to trade, for instance, under a product name. So LawPath is LawPath, but let's say they had a product named Online whatever Legal Services, then they can get a business name called Online Legal Services and trade under that name. They can get the trademark, which is LawPath, which is to protect the brand. And you want to have that license agreement if you're going to have a dual company structure. And then you're going to want to have terms and conditions for your business, terms and conditions for your website. There's things called click wrap agreements where you click to accept. If you're going to run an online business, we've done a webinar called Launching Your Online Business, so you can have a look at that. And you're going to want terms of trade, so the actual sales agreement that you're entering into with your customers. There's some permits that you might need to look for as well. So if you are in labor hire, or if you're in recruitment, or if you're into IT, for instance, and you're going to be hiring contractors and placing them into someone else's business to roll out a project, then you might need a labor hire license. Labor hire licenses are fairly new, so a lot of people don't know about them. You need one in the state of Queensland, ACT, Victoria, I think Tassie, South Australia, and WA, not New South Wales at the moment. Also, if you're doing food handling licenses, liquor licenses, you might need development consent if you're operating out of a register, if you want to have a storefront, for instance. So you can go to this website, you can look to see whether you need a license. And then you want to look at insurances. If you're a sole trader, you probably want insurance to protect yourself. Public liability is the slip and fall insurance. It's where someone is injured generally. So for instance, if you're a personal trainer, you take control of a park and you're teaching everybody in the park, someone twists their ankle because of a hole in the ground, you want public liability to cover yourself for that twisted ankle. If you're a personal trainer, you're doing training in the park, and you advise someone to lift up 80 kilo barbell, and they pull their back, and they're out of work for some time, that might be more professional indemnity because of the advice that you gave them. If you're selling a product, you want to look at product liability. That is, if the product's defective. We have a lot of products coming in from China these days that might have defective batteries. We see that right now with a lot of the scooters and e-bikes and things like that starting fire. You want to look at trying to get product liability in case something like that happens. Any employee that you have, you need to have workers' compensation for if they get injured. Director and officer insurance protects you if you're ever personally sued, for instance, for possibly the employment side of things or possibly misleading deceptive conduct. But director officer insurance is very expensive. Cybersecurity insurance is also very expensive, but it exists. And then we look at the shareholders agreements, and we're going to finish up now. We're in about 4 minutes, and we'll pass it back over to Connor in a second, and then I'll come back for your Q&A. So shareholders agreements, very quickly, it sets out who can appoint a director, who can remove a director, who has the right to access the books and records of the company. If you're going to sell the business, can you force the other shareholders to sell? If someone else is going to sell, can you tag along on that as well? Dispute resolution clause, because companies are governed by the Corporations Act. If you ever have a dispute related to the Corporations Act, it normally goes to the Supreme Court. And when I mention the Supreme Court, you normally need a solicitor and a barrister, and it's an expensive exercise. So normally you want a shareholders agreement that has a dispute resolution clause that says that if there is a dispute, then you can first go to mediation, or you must go to mediation before you actually go to court, where you effectively lock yourselves in a room for 8 hours with a third party trying to nut out a deal. And that is probably the most valuable clause in a shareholders agreement. Director duties, good faith, proper purpose, acting with due care, skill, and diligence, no insolvent trading, not using your position for an improper purpose. So if you have 2 different businesses, one with shareholders, one without, you can't steal a client from one business and take them across to the other, because you'll be breaching your duties as a director, because it's conflict of interest, it's misuse of information, it's misuse of position as well. So I'll pass it back over to Connor. That's a lot of information in 40 minutes. And I'll come back for any Q&A. So please pop your Q&A into the box now, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Damon. We'll cover the Q&A questions shortly. So if there is anything on your mind, please add that in now to the chat. I hope everyone found the content useful. For those of you who actually might be registering a business for the first time and potentially with us, good to know as well, if you are going to be operating from your home address, I'd recommend checking out our virtual office. You can actually use LawPath as your commercial address. It looks way more professional to clients and potential investors, but you also get the added benefit from increased privacy and security. Essentially opting into that, you hide your home address for anyone who would search you up and seeing where you live. And instead they'll see us, and we'll also actually receive and manage your mail from clients, from the ATO and from ASIC, so less of a paper trail. But importantly, if you are registering a company through us and opt in for that virtual office, we'll actually also receive your new company TFN and your corporate key for you. And if you do register a business for us and need assistance with your company renewals and making changes to the company, definitely opt in for the business compliance plan, as it's free upon registration, and consider utilizing our ASIC compliance plan. You'll get a dedicated ASIC agent to make changes for you. But a quick overview of how LawPath can help in a broader sense. Obviously, you've been given a brief overview of what you should consider when registering a company. But if you would like to sort of peek behind the curtain and have more questions answered, I would take advantage of our 7-day free trial, the Legal Advice Plan. For those of you who might have already previously engaged with lawyers in the past, they typically bill $600 for an hour's consultation. We're going to give you a whole week for free. And for those of you on the webinar, it does start today, and you'll have full reign of the platform. But what does it actually equip you with? So you'll have access to over 500 legal documents. These have been drafted by lawyers. They're up to date with Australian legislation. These consist of obviously company-related documents, documents for websites and online businesses, a multitude of different service level agreements, and over 100 documents alone pertaining to employment and HR. So these documents are actually already 99% complete. You just have to fill in the relevant information for you and for your business. There's a built-in contract management system that guides you through the document. So it's literally impossible to put a foot out of place, and it only takes 5 to 15 minutes to complete. The documents are actually also fully customizable, so you can delete and remove clauses. However, if you do remove something that jeopardizes the legality of the document, it will flag and it will notify you of that. But you can also, if you are adding also your own provisions, it would be well advised to speak to one of our lawyers. We do offer unlimited on-call contract reviews, and it's also included in the trial. So you can check, first of all, if I'm adding something in there, is it actually legally enforceable? Is it compliant? And would you recommend me adding in anything else? Is there anything else I can put in there tailored to my business, to protect my business, to favor my business? In fact, we also offer unlimited consultations with the legal advice plan. So you can ask us about the route you need to take for registrations. Really clever questions might be around share class codes, number of shares, the value of the shares, or ask about if it's worth doing the dual company structure based on your business, and anything else that might help you achieve financial growth. So there are actually 100 questions you could ask, but a great starting point is obviously understanding the right business structure for you, but also what contracts, documents, and agreements you actually need to establish for your clients, for your partners and your suppliers, with an emphasis always on protecting your interests and protecting your business. You might also want to ask us steps around protecting your intellectual property, including trademarking. You can ask us how to mitigate the legal risks or anything industry specific to your business. And for any of you who have employees, including yourself, what are actually your obligations and responsibilities? How can I protect myself as an employer with the right employment contracts and workplace policy documents? So those are just a few topics we cover. There's some of the hot ones there. Obviously, if you'd like to find out more how we help in any other legal need, please type in yes to the chat box, or drop me an email, which is shared in there as well, and we can see how we can help you. There are some other tools at your disposal in the free trial, including our workflows, and we also have an AI assistant. So it does have an Ask Me feature where you can actually pose it quick legal questions. It's a great tool for fast answers. It has a Draft Me feature as well, when we actually have lawyers who have no affiliation to LawPath whatsoever using that feature to draft clauses to add to the documents they're creating for their own clients. So great indication it's doing as intended, and actual lawyers are finding it enormously helpful. It has a review feature as well to provide some quick insights to your document, and a simplify feature, which if you're like me with no formal legal background and you're reading a clause and you're not quite sure what it means, the gold standard would be to speak to a lawyer to clarify, either through a consultation or through the live chat that you have connected to your lawyer. But you can actually just highlight that text and the AI will re-explain it in layman's terms. And finally, there's a translate feature as well. So handy if English isn't your first language, or you're presenting the document to someone where English isn't their native tongue either. So from the top, I think a lot of people also had questions around GST, tax compliance, and we do cover this. So you may want to look at our most comprehensive package, which is our legal and accounting advice. You can get unlimited consultations of our award-winning chartered accountants. And even if you already have an accountant, look, if we are more convenient and more cost-effective for you and your business, perhaps consider keeping both legal and accounting under one roof. But a lot of our clients on that particular subscription are provided with year-round advice on tax minimization, tax concessions, and deductibles. So if you do value saving $1 over spending $1, I would be asking and repeatedly asking, how can I minimize tax for my business? How can I apply for in terms of concessions? If I purchase this item for my business, can I get it partially or fully deducted from my business tax return? The accountants do also cover business structuring advice as well. You can get it from their sort of unique perspective. It's a lot more focused on tax benefits when you speak to them. And they can also help you if you're using any bookkeeping software such as Xero and MYOB. And they can show you how to optimize the utility of those accounting softwares. But to get our business success bundle, we do have, you'll see there, an add-on option to get your hands-on tax needs met. So you never fail to lodge a BAS or tax return. So they'll complete your BAS lodgements, tax lodgements, and financial statements. And while you do get unlimited consultations with our chartered accountants and tax agents, you do also get a special fiscal year consultation to do a deeper dive and analysis of your business's spending and revenue. So if anyone would like to claim the 7-day trial for the legal advice plan, you will be sent a link, but you can also type yes into the chat there, and some rep can reach out to you to discuss any questions you have. But we'll hand it back over now to Damon for our Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you very much.